Welcome to Mrs. True Crime. Today's video is an in-depth look into bodies found in boxes. It's a tale of family secrets and looming self-doubt. If you're triggered by anything dealing with death or abuse to children, feel free to click off this video. Perhaps check out my gaming channel, Retell Me Games, for some lighthearted content. If not, I'm Nicole. Let's get started. On the morning of August 8, 1886, Edward and Joseph Terrell, along with a friend, were walking through the Parker Farm district of Wallingford, Connecticut with their dog. The dog uncovered a 30 by 12 box under a low-lying bush. The box's label said it contained half a dozen pair of machine-sewed, fine-stitched men's shoes, but as the dog continued to investigate the object, he began to whine. Edward opened the box, and instead of finding new shoes for him and his companions, he discovered the remains of a man's torso wrapped in tarred paper. A medical examiner proclaimed that the body belonged to a man between 20 to 40 years old who died 5 to 10 days prior to being found. Inside his stomach was a large quantity of arsenic, pinpointing his cause of death. The box was traced back to a shoe factory in Fall River, Massachusetts. The box was filled with shoes and sent to a wholesale boot and shoe dealer in Chicago, who passed it to a local retailer. The retailer then emptied the box and threw it in the backyard of the store, where it remained for months before a man bought it and disappeared. Once the gruesome find circulated, speculation began on who the bloodied man used to be. The first theory was that he was Albert J. Cooley of Durham, which was approximately 20 minutes from where the remains were found. Cooley went missing after supposedly taking a $1,500 pension from a local slaughterhouse, but he was later found alive. The second theory was that the body belonged to a person who was setting fires in town for weeks and finally met his demise at the hands of his accomplices. This, however, was later debunked. The next theory was that the remains belonged to an instigator of the Haymarket Square riots in Chicago. In short, the riots were a result of a peaceful protest in Haymarket Square for 8-hour days at the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company and the killing of several workers by Chicago police on May 4, 1886. An unknown person tossed a bomb into the crowd as police tried to dissolve the protest. 7 policemen died, and an unknown number of protesters as well. Though no evidence was found, 8 leaders known as the Haymarket Martyrs were arrested and convicted. 1 committed suicide in prison, 4 were hung, and the remaining 3 were pardoned and given life in prison. This lead, though, went cold. In the midst of these speculations, new reports were discovered. Reportedly, locals found a bag at the bottom of a well near the location of the remains discovery. When residents returned the next day with authorities, the bag was gone, but a piece of human scalp remained. This caused a theory that the killer was hiding near the well, watching the remains and removed the evidence from being found. It's unclear how true this is. However, the victim's arms and legs wrapped in the same tarred paper were found a month later. Soon witnesses began to appear. A local woman from the Yalesville section of Wallingford, a good 5 minutes from where the initial remains were found, claimed that a bearded stranger appeared at her door with a blood-stained shirt and a bundle on his back, asking for directions to a pond. Hours later, she saw the same man without the bundle and a clean shirt. She would later recant this tale. Eventually, police detained a prostitute named Mabel Preston, also known as Mabel Gage, who claimed to know about the murder. Yet when questioned, she said she knew nothing about it. 2 years later, she committed suicide. The head of the man of the shoebox murder mystery has never been found, and his identity and killer remain a mystery. On May 12, 2003, Thomas Bright won storage unit number 6 in an auction in Safford, Arizona for $75. The unit didn't have much of value: a few household items, some random objects, and 3 stained cardboard boxes. Inside the boxes, to Bright's horror, were the remains of 3 infants. The babies were wrapped in blankets and garbage bags. Police were immediately called, and the storage unit was traced back to Diane Odell of Rome, Pennsylvania. Found working at a Rite Aid, she was arrested and held without bail. 8 days later, she was charged with 3 counts of second-degree murder. As the story of the babies in boxes murder case gained coverage, the one thought on everyone's mind was, why did she do it? Not a lot is known about Odell's upbringing, aside from what she shared. Living in Cononauga Lake, New York, she's claimed she was abused, both sexually and physically, since the age of 9. It's possible the abuse began with her father. As for her mother, who died in 1995, she was scared of her. She was so terrified of her mother that in post-conviction interview, she blames her for the deaths of her babies. The infants born in 1982, 83, and 85, according to Odell, were born out of wedlock to men she can't recall. She stated that one birth was from a rape, while the other 2 were from short relationships. Since she wasn't married to anyone during the births, she knew her mother would cause a fuss, so she tried to hide them. Without medical care or any prenatal vitamins for the babies, she gave birth to them on the bathroom floor of her apartment and hid them in a shed. Odell, at first, claimed the babies died of natural causes shortly after birth, but D.A. Stephen Lungen and pathologist Dr. Michael Baden say otherwise. Lungen says that Odell gave 7 different versions of what happened to her infants, while Baden says all 3 infants died due to traumatic asphyxia. Though he couldn't determine if the babies were born alive due to passage of time and state of mummification, he could determine cause of death. The first baby was suffocated by a towel stuffed down its throat. The second suffocated under Odell's thigh after birth, and the third was inconclusive, but also suffered a form of suffocation. Bannon also discovered that one was a boy and one was a girl. The other infant's sex was hard to determine. Between her marriage to James Jim Odell, giving birth to his 3 children, and leaving him in Florida in 1981, and then meeting her common-law husband Robert Saucerstein in 1985, and having his 5 children, Odell carried around the corpses of her deceased 3 infants. In July 1991, while staying in Arizona, Odell began making payments in a storage unit where she placed the infants. Abruptly, she and Robert left town, and she left the infants behind. In 1994, she stopped making payments on the storage unit, so it was auctioned off. No one in her family knew about the babies she carried around, and said she was an affectionate mother and pleasant woman. Some came to her defense that she didn't do what the court was accusing her of, but the court had one more tidbit under their sleeve. There was a 4th infant. In 1989, an investigation in Sullivan County, New York, was underway after infant remains were found in the suitcase in a car about to be crushed. The car was linked back to Diane Odell. She claimed the baby was stillborn in 1972 due to a violent assault by her father, who was now dead. Since there wasn't any evidence to prove otherwise, no charges were filed at the time. It was this case that helped seal the deal on the 2003 hearing. Judge Frank Labata said, "You allow those babies to rot away. It's a dark tale, but one you wrote." The defense argued it was accidental, and that Odell kept her babies close because she couldn't part with them. D.A. Lungen, however, said it was because she got caught in 1989 and didn't want to make the same mistake twice. On January 30th, 2004, Diane Odell was sentenced to 25 years to life, with the maximum sentence being 75 to life. Reportedly, the defense wanted to appeal, though there isn't any indicator that they did so, or if they did, they were not successful, as Odell is still imprisoned. She is eligible for parole in 2029. Andre Carmichael had a pretty satisfying adult life in 1999. He was married with 5 children. 4 of them were his stepchildren. He had a decent job, and he was finally reconnecting with his older sister. But something was missing. For a while now, Andre had been having memories and thoughts of a little girl that looked just like him, but he couldn't remember her at all. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, New York, Andre's mother, Madeline Carmichael, also had flashes of the same little girl, except her memories came in the sounds of a child crying, which she complained about often. But her superintendent stated that the only person who lived closest to Madeline was an elderly man. But the superintendent was wrong. There was a child nearby, but she wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't even moving. She was trapped in a closet in Madeline's bedroom where she'd been for the last 20 years. I see them both as devils, Sabrina Carmichael Yao, Madeline's oldest daughter, stated in court November 1999. Though she was 9 at the time of the crime, she remembers the day as if it happened yesterday. She tells her story of witnessing her mother and older brother Greg, aged 18 in 1979, slap and beat her 3-year-old little sister, LaTanisha. The Carmichael family upheld many rules under Madeline's thumb, and one of them was that they had to eat all of their food. In trying to appease her mother, LaTanisha began to eat, but it didn't sit well with her and she threw it back up. This angered Madeline, who beat the child with help from Greg until she collapsed. LaTanisha would never wake up. Carrying her body into the bedroom, the two wrapped her in a baby blanket, placed her inside 4 plastic bags, wrapped her in newspaper with the day's date, November 4th, 1979, and placed her in a footlocker with boxes of mothballs. For good measure, they then wrapped the locker in cellophane and placed it inside another plastic-wrapped footlocker and pushed the container into the back bedroom closet. Madeline would cover the closet with incense sticks, air fresheners, and baking soda boxes. She'd go on to pretend as if the locker held nothing of importance as she moved houses and trucked the footlocker with her, packing it with beds, lamps, and tables. As far as Madeline was concerned, LaTanisha was out of sight, out of mind, but she didn't count on her youngest son's determination. To ensure no one came looking for the missing child, Madeline said she was too poor to take care of LaTanisha and that she sent her to live down south, or that she was placed in foster care. Yet she was still receiving benefits for LaTanisha. Sabrina every so often would ask questions about LaTanisha, only for Madeline or Greg to beat her until she was silent. Andre, on the other hand, couldn't even remember his twin sister's name. He had no recollection of her voice, scent, smile, though he knew something was missing from his life. When he was 9, he spent the day with his aunt, who asked him if he'd been in touch with his sister. Automatically, he thought she meant Sabrina, and he responded the obvious, but she shook her head and said, "LaTanisha, your twin." From this moment forth, he'd ask about his sister, but would get shut down often or beaten by his brother. As the years passed, the abuse in the house became worse. In 1988, Andre was eventually removed from the residence after his mother and brother came to his junior high school and strip-searched and beat him for thinking he stole $400 from Madeline. Sabrina was removed years earlier. Soon thereafter, Andre was adopted by Dolores Lewis. During this period, Andre would see his mother only once. At 13, now older and wiser, he asked once more about his sister. This time, Madeline didn't raise a hand to him. She simply said she knew someone similar to Andre and would tell him about it when he was older. Years passed and Andre is now 23, and though his family may have forgotten about LaTanisha, Andre is still haunted by questions. As the Carmichaels grew and moved on, Madeline kept to herself in the Brownsville apartment. She was said to be kind and caring by neighbors, giving presents to neighborhood kids during Christmas or after errands. Greg was familiar to the 1-bedroom apartment since he visited often until he was jailed for robbery. Sabrina now had a family of her own and was beginning to get back in touch with Andre. In 1995, after a few get-togethers, Andre asked Sabrina about LaTanisha. When she evades the question, he says he's thinking of hiring a private investigator to find her. Reluctantly, Sabrina makes Andre sign a contract stating he wouldn't repeat anything she was going to say. She then proceeds to tell him that LaTanisha isn't just dead, she's buried in their childhood home. As the sequence of events is played out for Andre, he realizes that he was there when his sister was killed, but remembers nothing about it. Refusing to stay silent, he rips up the contract and contacts police. Cold Case Commander Captain Ray Ferrari gets a warrant and searches Madeline's home. He casually looks around before entering the bedroom. Madeline quickly tries to stop him, stating, "Please don't let them take me. I don't want any more suffering. Please just let me die." He opens the closet as Madeline hyperventilates and collapses. She's given oxygen and taken to Kings County Hospital. There, in the baking soda covered closet, were the remains of La Tanisha, footlocker and all. Madeline was soon arrested. At trial, the defense tried to place doubt on Sabrina's testimony because of how young she was at the time of the event, but she made it clear that she remembered what happened and was telling the truth, and the judge believed her. Madeline Carmichael was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 15 to life. Gregory Carmichael was found guilty of criminally negligent homicide and received 2.5 to 7 years, though some reports say 3 to 11 years. Madeline had many health issues going into prison. She suffered a stroke, had a pacemaker, and was diagnosed with bone cancer. 2 years after entering prison, she died. As for her other 2 children, Sabrina Carmichael Yao named her 6th child after her mother and visited her regularly when she was in prison. Andre recalls a time when he brought his daughter Andrea and his stepdaughter Dominique to meet his mother. Since Andrea was a splitting image of him, Madeline took more to Dominique. He thinks now it was because Andrea reminded Madeline of La Tanisha. He says, "I think God gave me back my sister as my daughter so that I could protect her." He also says he forgives his mom and brother for what they've done. Both Andre and Sabrina wrote a book about their sister and the events that followed. So, I just recently learned this was a Bible quote, so forgive me for being slightly religious here, but Luke 8:17 reads, "For there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed, and nothing concealed that will not be known and illuminated," aka, what's done in the dark comes to the light. We all have skeletons in our closets. It's just incredibly sad that in these cases, they meant it literally. I'm Mr. True Crime, and remember to be kind, be loud, be aware. For more information about the cases listed, why not check out some of these awesome links? And if you like what you saw and heard today, why not drop a like and a comment? Maybe subscribe while you're here? I make new videos every Tuesday and Friday, and you don't want to miss what's in store.